It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna. Welcome into episode number 619 of the Rico. We will call this a Kyle Tucker wait party. And I only call it that because a little over a year ago, we were doing a regular Rico Brogna, getting ready for the winter meetings, and it turned into a Juan Soto wait party. And it was maybe our longest Rico Brogna. I think we did about 2-3 hours. And in the middle of it, Juan Soto signed with the New York Mets. We all celebrated. We reacted to it. I don't know if that's going to happen on this edition of the Rico. And I don't think the reaction would necessarily be the same. With that said, we've got new developments on the Kyle Tucker front. We got specifics on Tuesday. One that the Mets have made a 3-year offer to Kyle Tucker, upwards of $50 million a year. And that is incredibly important information because not all short-term deals are created equal. And when you think of the Mets making a massive offer to Kyle Tucker, which involves losing 2 draft picks if you sign him, you wonder if there would be a willingness to do that for 1 year of his services. I was skeptical that it would be for 1 year of his services. And based on a 3-year offer, it wouldn't be for 1 year of his services, barring there being opt-outs that haven't been reported. It would be for 3 years of his services. And so now this comes down to what Kyle Tucker truly wants. We know the Mets have made this offer. Robert Murray's reported it. John Heyman's reported it. It's been all over the place that the Mets have made a massive AAV offer to Kyle Tucker, paying him a absurd amount of money, $50 million a year over a short-term deal. The question is this: does he value a long-term deal from Toronto more? And where are the LA Dodgers in all of this? Are the LA Dodgers matching the Met offer? If that's the case, we're screwed. Are they close to the Met offer? Are they deeply involved in the Kyle Tucker pursuit? And you get the sense, and I guess this is the good news in all this, that we're going to get an answer relatively soon. That the Kyle Tucker market is coming to a head because nothing's really going to change. This isn't like the Cody Bellinger situation where Scott Boras is trying to create a fake market for him. In this case, you've got 3 massive market teams in Toronto, Los Angeles, and the Mets. They're all making offers, and at some point, Kyle Tucker has to decide. My confidence level in all of this remains tepid at best. I still have a tough time believing he's going to pick the Mets over those 2 teams. But credit to David Stearns and credit to Steve Cohen. They're in it. They're trying. I mean, they're making a massive bid to improve this roster. And let me start right there. Because if the Mets somehow win the biddings of Kyle Tucker, first of all, I'll gladly apologize. I'll take 2 massive L's in terms of predictions from this offseason, one of which turned out badly, one of which would turn out well in getting Kyle Tucker. But I know there'll be a lot of discussion around the salary, how much he's being paid, if the Mets would have been better off giving that to Pete Alonso. Here's where I stand today in the middle of January. I can't fight the fights of 2 months ago. We can relitigate this offseason, and I'm sure we will at some point. But in this moment, as we stand here right now, this team has massive holes. And they've got a massive hole in this lineup. Kyle Tucker alleviates that. He is not a perfect player. He is not the best player in baseball. And dare I say, he may not be worth, quote unquote, $50 million a year. Though I would even quibble with that because a player is worth whatever someone is willing to pay. And if the Mets are paying a premium for Kyle Tucker because they don't want to give him a 7-year contract and they'd rather give him a short-term deal, then he's worth that amount of money. But what I know is if they succeed in outbidding the Blue Jays and Dodgers and acquiring the services of Kyle Tucker, this lineup is significantly better. This outfield is significantly better. This team is significantly better. The follow-up question, and I promise you, at some point, if the Mets win the bidding, we'll do a whole Rico Brogna analyzing it. But the question of, well, would they have been better off with Pete Alonso? Let's get Kyle Tucker and then figure that out. Because here's what I do know. You can't go back in time. Pete Alonso's not walking through that door. So yes, when this offseason is over, There will be an opportunity to relitigate the entire thing and talk about they were better off doing this and then maybe doing that and not doing this. But as of right now, in this moment, and I don't think this can be disputed, whether you're a Met fan or you're one of those non-Met fans who's voyeuristically checking out the Rico Brogna today. The Mets are a significantly better team if they acquire the services of this player. I don't think there's any question. And so I'm hoping, my fingers are crossed, that at some point we are going to get the news, whether it's from Jeff Passan or Robert Murray or John Heyman or who the hell knows. Chris McMonagle may break the story at this point. I want to see the report that Kyle Tucker's agreed to a contract with the New York Mets. And then at a later date, we'll all relitigate if they were better off signing him or not signing him. But right now, I'm hoping for the yes. Because earlier on Tuesday, I had to get an MRI. And MRIs are something we've talked a lot about on the Rico Brogna because usually it involves Met pitching needing an MRI. I needed an MRI because my back, my legs, I have a back issue. Not to bore you with that, but I had to get an MRI, and MRI are scary places. You go into a tiny tube, and dare you open your eyes and see how constrained you are, you could very well freak out. I have freaked out in the past at MRIs. I heard a story that Boomer Esiason had a tough time getting MRIs. So as I get pushed into this tube, I did two things. Number one, I closed my eyes so that I could never see what was around me. And number two, I spent 13 long agonizing minutes, because that's how long this tube was, this MRI tube was. The length of time was 13 minutes. I spent the entire time breaking down Met lineups with Kyle Tucker. So even if the Mets don't get him, even if they fail on acquiring his services, I want to at least thank Steve Cohen and David Stearns for helping distract me on those horrible 13 minutes in an MRI tube. And I don't want to tell you what I've come up with, because I feel like that's almost a jinx if we start breaking down Kyle Tucker lineup ideas. But I'll leave you with this. I'm still batting Juan Soto leadoff. I am remaining in the Soto leadoff spot. But let's see if the Mets can pull this off. Now, I want to read a lot of your emails about Kyle Tucker. I want to read a lot of your comments about Kyle Tucker and what this would possibly do to the Met offseason. But before I do that, I thought it was coincidental that on the same day all these reports are coming out about Tucker, David Stearns addressed the media for the very first time since both Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz became former New York Mets. And I was stunned by that because I didn't see it coming. And as of this recording of the Rico, there's no audio of it. There's no SNY press conference. He was apparently speaking to reporters on Tuesday about the Met offseason. And the timing is strange. I mean, there's no doubt. As there are reports that the Mets are pursuing Kyle Tucker, all of a sudden David Stearns sticks his head out of his hole. But I appreciate it because I think we all want to hear from David Stearns, as angry as we are. So in other Rico Brognas, we would listen to what David said and react to it. In this case, I'm going to read what David said, courtesy of the New York Post and SNY. And Met fans, tell me if this makes you feel any better. And I'll, of course, tell you if it makes me feel any better. Number one, we are committed universally from ownership on down to ensure that the next 5 years of the Mets are better, Stearns said at a luncheon with reporters at Citi Field on Tuesday, and that we win more games and meet the lofty expectations that we all have for ourselves. What we've done previously has not been good enough. We all know that. I certainly know that. We've got to do better, and we're committed to doing that. So far, a lot of fluff. I mean, no kidding, David. We better be better. Okay, yeah, I got you. And I would certainly hope that the Mets win more games over the next 5 years than the last 5 years, when you think about some of the bad years that are mixed in. Anyhow, more from David Stearns. We have elite talent at the top of our major league roster. We've got a very good farm system, and we've got a very good present-day major league team as we sit here today that's going to get better before we get to opening day. I certainly understand that there have been points this offseason that have been frustrating for our fan base. We're not blind to that at all. I'm certainly not blind to that. I hear it. I recognize it from my friends and family at times. I'm also very convinced that what we are doing is the right thing for our franchise going forward to accomplish our goals. David, let me clarify something. And obviously, signing Kyle Tucker would be a big relief in this process. This entire offseason has been frustrating. I want to make that very, very clear. There has been no point in this offseason in which Met fans have said, oh, but I like that. Even a solid move like Jorge Polanco, a solid move, I like the player, was met with concern about, oh my God, is that guy playing first base every day? Is that the run prevention defensive upgrade for Pete Alonso? And I like the Polanco signing. Even the Luke Weaver signing, solid signing. It brings you back to the idea that you're replacing Edwin Diaz with two guys who in the Yankee bullpen cost them the American League East. So when you say it has been a frustrating offseason at times, let me please eliminate the at times. It hasn't been at times. It's been the entire offseason. Now, do I agree that the Mets have elite talent at the top of our major league roster? Look, there's no question that Francisco Lindor is one of the best shortstops in baseball, and Juan Soto is one of the best hitters in baseball. So at the very tippy top of the 26-man roster, there is no argument that you employ two of the best hitters in all of baseball, two of the best players at their respective position. Outside of that, Devin Williams used to be one of the best closers in baseball. We'll see if 2026 can be a bounce back. I don't think there's anybody in your rotation other than the hope and the potential of Nolan McLean that fits that sentence as the top level of our major league roster being elite talent. So I would say there's partial truth to that comment. And the statement that better hold truth is that we will get better before opening day. Because as of right now, without Kyle Tucker being added, this lineup is worse. The starting pitching is exactly the same. And yes, bullpens are, you never know, but you lost the best closer in baseball and you're trying to replace him with a guy who was awful at times last year in Devin Williams, and even the year before in which he had an elite level year, missed a big chunk of time. I don't think David Stearns is alleviating any concerns. What would help alleviate concerns is winning out on this bidding on Kyle Tucker. Now, one thing I do want to address, because I want to read some of your emails, and this one email, I don't want to say it bothers me, but I do want to address it in case any Met fan agrees with this opinion from Will. Will writes, the $50 million a year offer for Tucker is fishy. It sure seems like a Will Pond type move. Hey, let's leak a rumor out that we're willing to go to $50 million per year, knowing we won't get him, but people will think we're willing to spend. This smells like total BS in an attempt to save face this offseason. Let's say it's actually true. You got to explain this to me. Stearns, Cohen say Pete and Diaz combined for $55 million per season, but that's a no. But Tucker and Devin Williams combined for $68 million, but that's a yes. I understand that Tucker's a better all-around player, and this is not an anti-Kyle Tucker email, but is he really $19 million per year better than re-signing a fan favorite we already knew can play well in New York City? Not to mention $100 million per year for two corner outfielders doesn't sound war-friendly. Couple of things. The comparisons to Pete, the comparisons to Diaz, is this better or is this not better? I promise you, if the Mets get Kyle Tucker and we have a complete offseason, it is a worthy debate. So I'll table that for now. As far as this being a Will Pond type move to leak out a rumor, I don't think they operate that way. And I also don't think it would make a difference. The Met fan is not going to look at missing out on Kyle Tucker and say, gee golly, we tried. I don't think that's a thing. I don't think it works. I don't think that's a smart strategy or an effective strategy. So I think it's real. And I think this negotiation and this offer to Kyle Tucker follows the theories we have all had for most of this offseason. And certainly a theory I've had for a while about David Stearns is we've tried to figure out the game plan. Doesn't mean we agree with the game plan, but we're trying to general manage along. David Stearns has made 2 offers in his Met tenure that we know of major long-term multi-year deals. Juan Soto, who they successfully got, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who they tried to get and failed. Outside of that, in the 3 off seasons we now have of David Stearns, they do not like to make long-term offers. I get how that pisses people off. This is not me defending it. This is me just explaining it. They don't want to commit to 5 or 6 years to a guy going into his 30s, which is why a year ago, the Mets gladly brought Pete Alonso back on essentially a 1-year deal while setting a record at the time for the amount of money they were willing to pay a first baseman. Why'd they do that? Did they do it to just appease the fans? I'm sure that was a part of it, but they did it because following David Stearns to a T, he'd rather give you more money short-term than a long-term deal. It's exactly what happened to Pete Alonso. So the Mets' approach here with Kyle Tucker is he's the best player on the market. And if we're being fair, if we're taking our emotion out, if we're pulling that aside, going into free agency, and this is not Evan talking, this is everybody in baseball talking. The best available free agent based on every metric was Kyle Tucker. The reason we never took it serious that the Mets were going to get him is because none of us ever thought they'd be willing to offer 9 or 10 years, which they're not. But apparently no one else was willing to do, maybe outside of Toronto, because we're still not sure what their long-term offer is. And so this negotiation is following the typical Stearns blueprint of, I'm not giving you a long-term deal, but I'll give you a huge AAV short-term deal. So I'm not worried, Willis, that this is a leak. I'm not worried that they're trying to save face, because it doesn't save face. It only saves face if you get the player. That's why I don't buy that stuff. Because you're if you are leaking it to try to save face, let me give everybody advice. Let me save Steve Cohen the time. It doesn't do anybody any good. The only thing that works is acquiring the player. Casey writes, these Tucker talks are confusing the hell out of me. If the reports are true that Stearns is willing to spend nearly $50 million a year on Tucker, is it crazy to think that Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo for roughly the same amount of money is actually a better use of funds? I get it. Pete Nimmo would be here for 5 years. God forbid you commit years to productive players, but it's just odd to me. To be clear, I want Kyle Tucker, but it's become a must-have because of the hole Stearns has created himself. I have no love lost with Stearns. I can't stand the guy, but the fan base is going to praise him if he brings in Kyle Tucker, but that will be short-sighted because we already had this production from guys that have proven they can play here. This feels like committing a crime just so you can be the one to solve it. No, I think you're looking at it wrong. So we have to look at the long-term vision. We can look at the short-term vision too. The short-term vision is, yes, Kyle Tucker would be making more money than Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso combined. And as long as that's not stopping David Stearns or Steve Cohen for that matter, from adding a starting pitcher that they need or adding another piece that they need, then why should we care? You know what I mean? It's only money. If it stops them from adding a starting pitcher, it's a fair point in the short term that the Mets would have been better off not going this route. But now let's take a look long term. Let's walk through the difference between clearly overpaying a player in Tucker for 1 year as opposed to having Brandon and Pete long term, or someone else long term. Include Cody Bellinger in that. 3 years from now, when Kyle Tucker is a free agent, you have just cleared all that money, either to sign somebody else, though, as I've warned you, free agency doesn't look that good 3 years from now, or you've developed so much talent that you don't need to go out and add a free agent. And that money that is not being paid to Tucker because he signed a short-term deal, or those 2 other players that you just mentioned, Nimmo and Alonso, could be used for pitching, could be used in another way. That's a part of the long-term benefit of signing a player to a short-term deal. You get the player in the prime of his career. In theory, you get the player more motivated because they're about to enter free agency again. And then once you get to that point, it's a complete reevaluation on how you want to spend the money. Like, if you ask me, there's a lot of the David Stern stuff that I disagree with, obviously. But one area I do agree is if you gave me the choice right now, you could have Kyle Tucker on a 3-year, $150 million deal. So that's 3 years at $50 million per. Or you could sign Kyle Tucker to an 8-year contract and pay him $40 million per. So it's $10 million less per year, but you've got him for 5 more years. It's a no-brainer. Give me the short-term contract. I don't disagree with Stearns about that. Here's where I would disagree with David. Here's where I think most of us would. If you're going to lose the player and he prefers the long-term deal, and now the Mets have a chance to end the musical chairs of MLB offseason without any of these big bats, and they never even made an offer to Alonso, and they're not willing to go long-term with Kyle Tucker, and they won't touch Cody Bellinger, what does this lineup look like? And the answer is, it's not good. This lineup needs a guy like Kyle Tucker. So I get the benefit of the short-term contract. Ron writes, Evan, I want to hear your thoughts on this. We're all disappointed with how this offseason has played out, but hear me out. If the Mets sign Kyle Tucker, I don't know how likely it is, but if they do, I would say their offense is better than last year. Tucker, Simeon, Polanco are better than Pete, McNeil, and Nimmo. Am I wrong here? Well, there's 2 ways to go about this. There's looking at last year and taking the stats of all of those players from a year ago and saying, hey, what's better? And then, of course, there's the projection of this upcoming season. If you look at last year and I combine the numbers, the trifecta of Nimmo, Alonso, and McNeil played 414 games. It's very, very important. That's why it's the first number I'm using. Availability is a big deal. Kyle Tucker played 136 games. That's not 162. That's not what Pete did. The year before that, Kyle Tucker missed half the season. So we need to be fair about the fact that staying on the field is a big deal, and it's one of the great advantages that Pete Alonso had. Kyle Tucker hasn't had that over the last 2 seasons. 136 games is close to a full year. 78 games is not a full season. But if you take McNeil, Nimmo, and Alonso, it's 414 games. For the trifecta that they added, it's 401 games, which is close. So even with Tucker missing a handful of time last year, Marcus Simeon played 127 games. McNeil played 122, so slight edge for Simeon. Polanco played 138 games. Brandon Nimmo played 130. And even though Polanco is replacing Pete in terms of position, and Tucker would be replacing Nimmo in terms of position, I don't look at that way. I look at it as Polanco replacing Nimmo and Tucker replacing Alonso in terms of the kind of hitters they are and the the kind of impact that they have. We went over this about a month and a half ago when they signed Polanco. Polanco's numbers are eerily similar to Brandon Nimmo. Anyhow, the trifecta they added played 13 less games than the trifecta they lost. The trifecta they lost hit a combined 75 home runs. The trifecta they added hit a combined 63 home runs. So slight edge, actually significant edge, 12 home runs. I don't want to shortchange from the guys they're leaving. The OPSs from the guys they lost, 746, 760, 871. For the guys they're adding, 669 for Simeon, 821 for Polanco, 841 for Kyle Tucker. Very similar. Slight edge, though, for the guys that they're missing. The advantage, and I know this is the stat that I hate and a lot of people hate, but I do want to at least give you all the facts. The addition would be WAR. The WAR they're losing from McNeil, Nimmo, and Alonso is 8.5. The WAR they're gaining is 10.5. Is that the fairest thing in the world? I think Pete gets treated horribly by WAR. His WAR was 3.4 last year. Tucker's was 4.6. And I think a big part of that, even though Pete Alonso had a better offensive season overall than Tucker, is the defense and the base running. That's where Tucker gets the edge. So is the Met lineup better? And of course, this is ignoring the fact that, is Francisco Alvarez going to have a better full season? Is Brett Beatty going to have a better full season? So there's a lot of other aspects to the Met lineup, but using those 3 guys, Based on last year, the numbers are very similar. I think they lose a little bit of pop because Kyle Tucker isn't that kind of pure slugger that Alonso is, but I think there's more bat on ball. I think there's better defense. I think it's different. And I think that's the best word to use. Is it better? I don't know how much better it is. I don't think it's significant one way or the other. I also don't think it's significantly worse one way or the other. We've almost gone into this. It's really different. It's kind of a neutral difference between the offense of last year and the offense of this year. But here's the holdout. The hope is Marcus Semien was terrible last year. And so if Marcus Semien is 35% better and Kyle Tucker doesn't fall off the rooftop, well, then yes. And of course, then the question is, well, what is Brandon Nimmo, Evan? You're just going to assume he's going to suck? No, I have no idea. I don't know what Brandon Nimmo is this season. I assume Pete Alonso puts up the same numbers. I know that was the best year he's had in years, but you put him in that ballpark. I have no reason to believe Pete's going to decline. So if the Mets succeed in getting Kyle Tucker, and we'll have much more debate on is it better, is it worse, and all that, the one thing they truly would be is significantly different. Significantly. And I would argue better defensively. I mean, Marcus Semien is a Gold Glove caliber player at second base. Kyle Tucker, and I assume Tucker would play right and Soto would move to left. Tucker is a huge upgrade in right field over Soto and a huge upgrade over Brandon Nimmo. Obviously, Soto moving to left. Hopefully, Juan Soto just continues to get better defensively. He has promised us he's going to work on his defense. Polanco's the wild card because I still don't love the idea of him playing first base, and who knows what kind of first baseman he'd be. And I'd go out and make another move. Now, I don't know if the budget is unlimited, but I've mentioned the name Christian Walker. I think they could get him for a song. But I think what winning this negotiation would do, in my opinion, is it wouldn't cause anyone to think they won the offseason, but I think it would at least bring the lineup back to feeling as good as last year, if not better, but significantly different. I did ask a poll question earlier today on my Twitter account, and I did it purposely, A, to read the results, and B, to read some of your comments here on the Rico. And the poll question was simple. If the Mets pull this off and win the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes, does it change your feelings on this offseason? I know without asking, Joe B will say absolutely not. He'll go to town on Kyle Tucker. Hey, is this guy that good? But I am curious for everybody else. Does it? I have to be perfectly honest with you. I want the player. We just went through a little bit of a breakdown on what this team would look like if they added him. I don't know emotionally how I will respond. I don't know if this is going to be a celebratory Rico Brogna. I don't know if I'm going to be dancing in the streets. I mean, I'm excited if they add the player. I think he's really, really important. But there is still some melancholiness, as much as I try to move on from it, off of the players they've lost. But the poll question again was, if the Mets pull this off and sign Kyle Tucker, does it change your feelings on this offseason? Yes, I'd feel good. No, I'd still be pissed. Or it's positive, but I need more. Positive, but I need more, 42%. Obviously, impacting this rotation would be a part of that because they've done nothing to add to this rotation. Yes, I feel good is at 36%, and only 22% are in that Beningo state of no, I'm still pissed off. Let me read some of your comments. The great Joe DeMeo writes, I mean, they still need to add a starting pitcher either way, even if not an expensive one financially, but I'd be happy with the offense. Yes, I think the offense, even though I would still want more. I just mentioned Christian Walker like a real first baseman. I assume they would do nothing more than that, especially when they're paying $100 million per year to two corner outfielders. But yes, the starting pitching has not been added. Floppy Cards writes, Evan, if you lose everything you did and add Kyle Tucker, you're probably the same, but most likely worse than last year, and that was an 83-win team. And then the worst team in the second half. You would need Tucker, Valdez, and more to even hope for 85 wins. No? No, I don't agree with that. I think that this upcoming season, there are so many differences that would make me feel like I can't just equate the last 4 months and say everything's going to be the same. Like, I can't assume Nolan McLean's going to dominate, but I can assume Nolan McLean's going to be on the major league roster. I do have confidence that if Minaya and Senga are still here, they can't possibly be as bad as they were last year. So I don't even think the pitching would be as bad as it was a year ago. I still need them to add somebody. I agree with you on that. But no, I think they're better than an 83 win team off the top of my head. SMX writes, we're not getting any more, full stop. Maybe. I mean, I'd love to say that you're wrong, but I guess you never know for sure. Keep this in mind about not getting more. The starting pitching market still hasn't moved. You know, Dylan Cease signed like a million years ago, but Framber Valdez is still out there. Ranger Suarez is still out there. So it's not as if guys are flying off the shelves. Anthony writes, having one of the best outfielders in baseball outside of whatever Carson Brenge brings to the table is a positive. Still need to shore up the pitching, but would certainly be a step to wash the bad taste of the offseason out of my mouth. I agree with that. Juan Soto is a Met writes, I'd be happy with the offense for sure. Tucker, Simeon, Polanco have a better ceiling than Alonso, Nimmo, and McNeil. Now, if they follow up with a trade for Freddie Peralta, that will be the move that saves the offseason for David Stearns. Gil Lemons writes, what if you've been positive all along? Just because you and a subset of the fan base are all up in arms doesn't mean everyone feels the same. What I would ask you, Gil, and no, you're right, I don't represent every fan. I think you'd agree, Gil, most Met fans have not been happy with this offseason. But I want to be fair to you. Why have you been happy with this offseason? I like Jorge Polanco as a player, so it's not insulting he who they added. But when you look at the changes in the bullpen and the uncertainty that comes with Devin Williams and Luke Weaver, who played a big role in the Yankees not winning their division last year, and you look at losing the certainty of Pete Alonso playing 162 games, and even Brandon Nimmo, who pretty much posts every day, why were you positive? I guess would be my follow-up. Queens to Midtown writes, if anyone says, no, I'm still pissed, they're a fool, and they're just sad they lost their favorite players. If they get Kyle Tucker, they are immediately better offensively. There's no doubt the pitching needs answers still, but if they sign Tucker tomorrow, the offseason is moving in an incredible direction with time. Yeah, not only, we mentioned about the lineup. Would the lineup be better? How much better would the lineup be? Does it have a bigger ceiling like one of our last Twitterers were? But the run prevention line that annoyed all of us would be backed up by production. I mean, you would be looking at an elite level corner outfielder defensively in Tucker. I know the metrics haven't said that the last 2 years, but he's been that most of his career. I have no reason to believe he's on a full decline. And obviously a huge upgrade at second base with Marcus Semien. And I'd certainly argue their defense at third base naturally is going to be better if Brett Beatty gets the opportunity. Santho writes, well, they are a far better team than last year, so obviously. Okay. David Whitman writes, why do I feel like Kyle Tucker is the second coming of Jason Bay? So here's the good news about that, David. I know that sounds like a really negative tweet, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now that say, shut up, the next Jason Bay, blah, blah, blah. We have no idea about how a player responds when they come to New York. So as much as one wants to dismiss that and say, how could you say that? It's absolutely a fair question. It's not negative because I'm not telling you he's going to be the next Jason Bay, but I understand that perspective. I think that is a fear you have when any free agent is signed. Is this guy going to be able to handle New York? Is this guy going to come here and wilt? And I understand why you say that. You say that because if you glance at Kyle Tucker and you just look like, if you look at the picture on the YouTube banner that Pete Hoffman created, even if you listen to this podcast by downloading it, if you just have a second and go to YouTube and you look at the banner that Hoff used of Kyle Tucker wearing a Chicago Cub hat, he kind of looks like Jason Bay. I mean, I'll admit that. He kind of looks like him. But let's say you're right. Let's say the Mets somehow win the bidding on Kyle Tucker. He comes here for 3 years on $150 million, grossly overpaid. He makes $50 million a year. And let's say he becomes Jason Bay. Let's say you're right. Because it's a short-term deal, in 3 years, you move on. That's the beauty of a 3-year contract. That question, is he the next Jason Bay? He feels like the next Jason Bay, is the greatest defense for David Stearns' pursuit of short-term contracts. Because even if it turns into the biggest disaster ever, okay, it's only 3 years. And the good news is, and this is the other reason why I love the short-term big money offer, remember what Remember what Steve Cohen did not too long ago, the last time he gave out contracts like this, and it just didn't work out. Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. Different players, different circumstances, different part of their career, but grossly overpaid at the time on a short-term contract. And what was the thinking at the time? We're just going to bridge until we have better young pitching. That was at least the hope in theory. And in year one with Scherzer, it sort of worked. They won over 100 games until Max Scherzer took a dump at his pants in the wild card series, and even before that against Atlanta. But Steve Cohen was willing to write a check, make those contracts go away, and turn it into prospects. If this doesn't work out, it's just a massive check a billionaire owner writes. This is the kind of contract, this is the kind of move that you envision from a billionaire owner. Now, I'm pissed off that the billionaire owner hasn't kept the guys we like. I'm not going to exonerate, because I think a part of the dream of the billionaire owner is Jacob deGrom's here forever. Pete Alonso's here forever. We'll never lose a homegrown guy. All right, I just needed to get that off my chest. Now let me get back to the big money short-term deal. That's the beauty of having a billionaire owner. Craig from Long Island with a great question. Craig writes, hey, Evan, I have a nerdy baseball question. Since the Mets, the Blue Jays, and the Dodgers are the 3 teams in the running for Kyle Tucker, and the Dodgers have already signed Edwin Diaz, who had the qualifying offer, and the Blue Jays have already signed Dylan Cease, who had the qualifying offer, what happens in the case if they sign a second guy who has the qualifying offer? Are we the favorites? Does that put them at a big disadvantage? What's the penalty? What does it all mean? It's a great question, Craig. So, yeah, the Dodgers and the Blue Jays have already lost their 2nd and their 5th draft picks. Apparently, they would lose their 3rd and their 4th if they signed another QO free agent. So there is, without question, a pretty big, hefty penalty for both Los Angeles and Toronto if they end up signing another qualifying offer free agent. Let me read it straight from the great Joe DeMeo. We read his response earlier. Joe is very clued in on this kind of stuff, as well as the Met minor league farm system. The Mets would lose their 2nd and 5th highest selections in the 2026 draft, as well as $1 million of international free agent money from their 2027 budget. Same thing they lost a year ago when they signed Juan Soto, who was also a qualifying offered free agent. The Dodgers and the Blue Jays would lose their 3rd and their 6th highest selections in the draft. They have both already lost their 2nd and their 5th, and the $1 million from international free agent money. So they would lose 2 more draft picks in the upcoming draft, their 3rd pick and their 6th pick. Hefty. No doubt. I mean, do I see David Stearns being willing to do that? Probably not. So if the Mets were the team that had already signed a QO free agent, I would say, oh, they're not giving that up. And we talked about just giving up the 2nd and the 6th and the $1 million in international money to begin with. Would he do that over a 3-year deal or a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal? But your question is, does it give the Mets the advantage? It only gives the Mets the advantage if the Blue Jays aren't willing to give it up. And clearly they are. Because if the Blue Jays have made a quote-unquote long-term offer for Kyle Tucker, they know full well that if Kyle Tucker accepts that offer, they're losing those 2 draft picks. So does it give the Mets the advantage? I don't think it does, just based on that. Like, it would only give them the advantage if it caused the team to not be willing to make the offer and not want to sign the player. If you believe the reports of Tuesday that the Toronto Blue Jays have already made a long-term offer, then it doesn't affect them. You know what I mean? Then it doesn't affect them because they've made the offer. The Dodgers are the mystery team. The Dodgers are the mystery team because we don't know if they made an offer. We also don't know if the Dodgers are more, willing to give up those 2 draft picks. So what I would say is, does it give the Mets an advantage? I guess in theory, because the other team is damaged more. But as long as the Blue Jays and Dodgers are willing to do it, then there is no advantage. It doesn't change Kyle Tucker's decision.
Evan, this has been a great conversation. I've listened to this the entire time pretty much. And don't tell C-Mac because I was also bored up in his show. That being said, I have a major question for you. And this is more about David Stearns. If Kyle Tucker, maybe you hit on it, maybe I didn't, maybe you didn't. So I apologize if you did. If Kyle Tucker is so good that he's fit for $50 million a year for 3 years, why does it feel like if there's a long-term deal from somebody else, the Mets will lose out on him? If the deal is right. Why, if it feels like he's good for 3 years, $150 million to fix this team, to help win, why wouldn't he be good for 4 years or 5 years or 6 years?
Because Kyle Tucker, if he signs a 3-year contract, would be a Met at age 29, 30, and 31. Some call that the prime of one's career, the years of best production. If you give him an 8-year contract, he is now signed not only for 29, 30, and 31, but for 32, 33, 34, and 35, where is that risk of decline? Those are the contracts that, you really don't want to be locked in paying a guy $45 million a year, especially if you're unsure of what they're going to be, which is part of why they never wanted to give Pete Alonso a 5-year deal. So you know the answer to that question. Like, well, what are you confused by?
Well, but here's the thing is right now, like we're saying, the Mets are putting this offer out there. The Blue Jays, we know, have a long-term deal out there. If we lose him to the Blue Jays for the long-term deal, like if he's good enough for a short term, why would we not want to get him for the long term as well?
I just told you, because they don't want to commit to him into his mid-30s. And like one of our emailers said, hey, I'm concerned he'd be Jason Bay. What if that guy's right and he just can't handle New York? Imagine being locked in on an 8-year contract to that, as opposed to a 3-year contract where, all right, that didn't work out and you move on. Like I said this earlier, and I'll say it again to you. Maybe not with Soto because he's generational and all that. If you gave me a choice in a perfect world to get the great player or the really good player on a 3-year deal at a higher AAV or a 6-year deal at a lower AAV, I would take the guy on a shorter term contract. Why would I want to be locked in on a longer contract when he could decline? He could become injury prone. I could also develop my own players. Like, I totally understand why the Mets want him on a short term contract.
I respect it and I get that too. But on the other hand, if it means that you may lose out on the player because somebody else has put in a long-term offer,
that's different.
That's more appealing.
No, that's different. And that's where I would differ with David Stearns. Like, if you're just asking me, all things are equal, would you rather sign Kyle Tucker to a 3-year deal for $150 million or a 7-year deal for $280 million? I'd rather sign the guy to a 3-year deal. Now, if ultimately they're not going to sign him because he prefers a long-term deal, that's a different discussion. Because then you have to decide, am I willing to give an uncomfortable contract? We've talked about this, getting uncomfortable to get the player. Am I willing to go to an uncomfortable place to get the player I want or miss out on him? But that's not what's happening right now. I think this is consistent with the idea that they're trying to build a really good roster without being committed to long-term contracts. I don't know what you want. Like, do you want Kyle Tucker on the Mets? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, but you only want him on a long-term deal, not a short-term deal?
No, but here's my thing: is I don't care, but if we lose him to a long-term deal, that would bother me.
Yeah, but I think that's a different discussion. That's debating would it have been worth it to go to 8 or 9 years. I'll ask it this way because I answered it, so I'll ask you. I'm giving you a choice. Kyle Tucker's agent calls you up and says, Hoff, I'm going to give you a choice. I'm signing with the Mets, but I'm going to give you a choice. You can either have me on a 3-year deal in which I'm making $50 million per year, or an 8-year deal in which I'm making $40 million per year. Which one would you rather sign my client to?
I understand. Yes. Obviously, I'd go 3 years, 150.
Okay. You agree with me. You would rather sign the player for a higher AAV, means he's grossly overpaid, which I'm okay with. Apparently, you're okay with. You'd rather sign the player to a 3-year, $50 million a year deal. You'd rather do that.
Yes.
Then what the hell are you bitching about?
Well, because I see that the reports are that the Blue Jays are out there giving a long-term offer, and that concerns me.
When they lose him to the Blue Jays, which they may. I mean, I've been consistent that I don't think they're going to get Kyle Tucker, so I expect the doom, Rico Brogna. When they lose him to the Blue Jays or the Dodgers, then we can bitch, or you can bitch, or everyone else can bitch about they should have gone 7 years. As of right now, they are trying to get the player on a short-term, high AAV contract. And it seems like you have a puss on your face about it.
I do. I don't believe him. I don't believe anything. This is, you know what this is going to remind me of? This is going to be worse than Carlos Correa signs with the Mets a few years ago. This is going to be like, oh, we're going to get Kyle Tucker, $50 million a year. Oh, this is amazing. There's no way he's not going to be here. And then the Dodgers or the freaking Blue Jays give a long-term deal, and you're like, oh, we got blown away. Yeah,
we shall see. I have sat here for the last few weeks every time we talked about Kyle Tucker, and I've assumed that they weren't going to get him. I still assume they're not going to get him. Let's see if they don't get him. I do agree, though, that missing out on him is going to feel like a massive disappointment because I don't think there is a pivot. The Cody Bellinger stuff, it's not happening. I mean, clearly Cody Bellinger and the Yankees are dancing with each other, and eventually the Yankees will bring him back, or some other team, maybe it's Toronto, if they miss out on Tucker, swoops in and makes an offer that the Mets aren't willing to make. Because if the Yankees are already offering Cody Bellinger a 5-year deal and offering him $37 million a year, the Mets aren't going there. You know, unless the Mets take the Kyle Tucker offer and hand it to Cody Bellinger, which would be, you know, certifiable. Like, hey, let's get him on a short-term deal and grossly overpay him. So that will be difficult because I'm not exactly sure what the backup plan would be. And right now, this lineup would be with a big hole. No doubt about it if they don't get Kyle Tucker. So fingers crossed, ladies and gentlemen, that at some point in the next couple of days, we're going to do an instant reaction Rico responding to Tucker signing with the Mets. I am not confident, but I at least want to leave you with some positive vibes. So let's just hope to the baseball gods that they can seal the deal. And then we'll spend a few weeks arguing with people who mock the fact that Kyle Tucker makes way too much money. And I'll give you a hint if it ever comes to that. Just laugh at them and say, who cares? I pay enough in season tickets and enough in Met tickets and enough in cable bills. And by me, I mean all of us, that we don't care how much he makes. Go produce. Anyhow, we appreciate you listening to the Rico Brogna. You can always email us, thericob@gmail.com, thericob@gmail.com, and make sure you have subscribed to the Rico Brogna, because as soon as we can, I'm on the air between 10 and 2. Hoff's producing. As soon as we physically can, we will give you a live Rico on the YouTube channel and a Rico Brogna that's posted wherever you download your podcast as soon as possible around breaking news. Thank you very much for listening, downloading, and chilling with us on episode 619 of the Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.